And right now, it is a massive lobbying blitz in the meantime. And the lobbyists, as well as the folks on the Capitol Hill, are saying they want to have those 60 votes accounted for by July 4th, which is a pretty ambitious timeline, especially when we haven't seen the complete finalized combined text. But it is definitely in the realm of possible.
This episode is brought to you by iTrust Capital. iTrust Capital allows you to invest in crypto as well as precious metals like gold and silver via an IRA. And this gives you huge tax advantages. So you can invest in over 90 crypto assets, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and many more. You also get access to stablecoins such as Circle's USDC and Ripple's RLUSD. And as it relates to precious metals, you can invest in gold and silver, and these are the physical assets. So you're not investing in paper gold and silver. So on this platform, you can redeem the gold and silver if you choose to, and not many platforms offer that. Now, the big advantage to investing via iTrust Capital's IRA is the huge tax advantages. Many of you know you incur capital gains taxes when you sell at a gain. Well, you can minimize the effect of some of that by doing it via an IRA, especially if you have a long-term view on crypto as well as precious metals. And you can buy and sell crypto and precious metals 24/7. It's low cost and no monthly fee. So this is a great option to get exposure to these two great asset classes. And in addition, they have a great custody solution. It's called Premium Custody Account. So it uses institutional grade crypto custody, such as Coinbase Prime, which BlackRock leverages. iTrust also uses Fidelity Digital Assets as well as Fireblocks, and it's a closed loop system. So if someone hacks into your account, they can't withdraw funds. I believe this is the second safest way to custody your assets, right behind self-custody, where you control the private keys. And within the custody account, you could buy and sell 24/7. It's low fees. So this is a great option for custody of your assets, and you can sleep at night knowing that you're getting the institutional grade custodial services. So once again, two great products here from iTrust Capital, the IRA, where you can roll over your existing 401k or IRA to iTrust Capital's version, getting the huge tax advantages, and the institutional custody. And folks, if you sign up with my link at itrustcapital.com/go/thinkingcrypto, you could get a $100 funding bonus. I have an account with iTrust Capital, so I encourage you to go check out iTrust Capital, learn about their services, and see if it's right for you. Again, you can get a $100 funding bonus by signing up via my link, which is itrustcapital.com/go/thinkingcrypto. Link will be in the description. Hey everyone, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm Tony Edward.
And I'm Amanda Whitcroft.
And joining us is Ron Hammond, who's the head of policy and advocacy at Wintermute. And we are going to catch up on all the latest details around the Clarity Act and crypto regulations. Ron, great to have you back on.
Always great to be on, Tony. A lot to cover, and the upside, it's always the new positive news. Looking forward to getting into all of it.
Yeah, Ron, you always have your finger on the pulse of what's happening in DC. You spent so many years there, and we were just talking before the recording. Ron, the Clarity Act markup made it out of the Senate Banking Committee with bipartisan support, huge, historic. But everyone wants to know what's going to happen next. So, Ron, can you take us behind the curtain? What are the next steps with this bill, and when do you anticipate it could get to the full Senate floor for a vote?
Yes, definitely. So right now, it's actually pretty incredible that we got that much bipartisan support at the markup, and this changes the game completely. A lot of us in DC were expecting a more partisan markup, very similar to what happened in the Agriculture Committee back in January. But now that we have Senator Gallego from Arizona, as well as Senator Brooks from Maryland on the Democrat side joining the Republicans, this has got some momentum here. Because again, the magic number is 60, and they likely won't bring this bill up for a vote until they are pretty confident they have 60 votes here. It's very rare for a bill to fail on the House floor, minus like that healthcare vote with John McCain tanked it. But those are few and far between. They want to make sure they have the guaranteed votes. So right now is a massive lobbying blitz. So what we're going to see is probably a new text come out when they combine the agriculture bill as well as the banking bill. So it'll either be the DAMCA or whatever it's called, or the Clarity Act, whatever they decide to call it there. They're going to combine the two bills together because there are some key differences. And so it's really important to see where they line up on these two bills. And then they're going to be trying to get to see if they can get to 60 votes. And right now, it is a massive lobbying blitz in the meantime. And the lobbyists, as well as the folks on the Capitol Hill, are saying they want to have those 60 votes accounted for by July 4th, which is a pretty ambitious timeline, especially when we haven't seen the complete finalized combined text. but it is definitely in the realm of possible. So right now, I'd say it's very aggressive on Capitol Hill. The banks are hitting the hill hard. Crypto is hitting the hill hard, and I expect a lot more to come out, both in the media as well as stories from folks in the Senate pretty shortly.
And you had shared on your X that this Bloomberg article, which I didn't realize, but I guess some of the Democrats who had voted yes in the committee, they may not support the final version. So is there a bit of like political theater going on in terms of election season, or how would that become a thing?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that play out, Amanda, directly right now with the ethics issue, which is kind of still unresolved, unfortunately, after the markup. So to your point, we saw both Democrats who did support the bill have a caveat saying, "Hey, my vote's not guaranteed when we go to the Senate floor. I want to make sure we hammer out this ethics issue." And now it depends, which side of the aisle you talk to. One side will say this is a mandatory thing; we have to get this in the market structure bill because we've seen issues with the current administration and their involvement in this industry. At the same time, we see more people saying on the right, this is more of a political theater of sorts. So take whichever truth you want to have. But unfortunately, this is the reality right now in DC. Politics does have a way to mess things up. But the ethics issue does seem to be kind of the linchpin right now to get a lot more of these Democrats on board. As we kind of saw when Ruben Gallego said in the markup that he was going to support the bill, it seemed like Angela Alsobrooks kind of had that political cover of sorts to follow him in line as well. And now that there's more Democrats on record saying that they support this bill, it's going to be a lot easier to get to that 60 vote threshold. Not guaranteed, though. This, unfortunately, this ethics issue is really sticky. And there's going to probably be other issues like the banks trying to pull away either Republicans or Democrats in the meantime to make that vote count a lot harder to get. So when I say this is a major battle having behind the scenes, and it's just starting, get ready. It's going to buckle up pretty soon.
Ron, a follow-up question on the ethics issue. Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't there also an ethics aspect to the stock market as well, with members of Congress trading stocks? So why don't they just do a bill overall that all assets, whether it be gold or oil or stocks or crypto, that should be addressed separately?
So this is where it gets a little tricky because for a lot of these Democrats, since we are getting closer to the election, I'd say, if this same conversation was happening last year, this time, it may be a little different because we're not so close to the election. But the Trump ethics issue on a number of fronts, but mostly crypto, have been the mainstream, apparatus for quite some time. And so a lot of Democrats feel like they have to actually address this, whether it be for political reasons or actually, more legitimate reasons. Pick which one, but it's politics. So this is kind of the situation that they find themselves in. At the same time, we've seen the White House, kind of have a really staunch position saying we don't want any ethics issues or provisions in here whatsoever. But in order to get these Democrats, including Christian Gillibrand, you got to have something in there. So this is what's happening behind the scenes. At least how far does it go? It's unclear. It's also a little difficult considering that this is the congressional and the legislative branch putting more limitations on the executive branch, which does kind of run to some more legal navigating of sorts. And so there's also other issues on that front as well, and precedent setting potentially for other assets down the road. So we'll see what happens, but this is more of a political play, and this is definitely more between the principles of the Democrat side, the Republicans in Senate, as well as the White House.
Can you, because I know you were talking about, and that was my next question to you. So I know you were talking to Paul Barron about ethics being an issue even prior to it passing in the banking committee. So that's still an issue. Can you just kind of expand on that even more? So like what specifically is in that bill right now that is an issue with regard to ethics?
Yeah, it's more of a black box right now because there really wasn't much in the last draft. There were a couple of amendments that were introduced, but they were either thrown down in committee via votes, or they weren't even accepted to do voting measures in the committee, because technically, it's a little technical here, but it does belong in another committee of Congress, not the Agriculture Committee, not the Bank Committee. It's more Judiciary, which we don't need another committee involved in this legislation. Two is tough enough already, but this is kind of just shows the scope of Congress here, because when there's a train leaving the station, not many bills pass this year. Everyone kind of sees this as the opportunity to get their either political points in, or B, their more other priorities, whether it be the Credit Card Competition Act, ethics, or a slew of things. So this is kind of like one of the situations where people see a bill moving, and this is a time to attach a bunch of stuff, including, as we saw, a housing provision that was enough to convince a Republican from Louisiana to join in the markup. So this is what happens in the legislative process. It gets a little sticky here, but I will say this is unfortunately kind of the political apparatus of this legislation. And the more we inject politics into this, the worse it's going to be to get that 60 vote threshold. And then finally, I keep an eye, I talk about the lobbying blitz and the PR blitz that's happening right now. And the most, probably the best example right now is Ben McKenzie, the actor who's been always around whenever there's a negative crypto story, a headline. He loves to just thrust himself back into the fray. He hosted some like movie watching ceremony or whatever on Thursday in DC. I guess it didn't get enough views because he went on Bill Maher again the next day and Friday, and he was found the same points that, hey, if you're actually in support of this legislation, you're actually enabling Trump's crypto grift, which is not at all what this is. This is a regulatory bill, but this is the kind of the PR media campaign machine that we've seen before. We've seen Ben McKenzie come around just at the most convenient times when crypto's going through issues. And this is no different. So at least the upside is that we kind of know the players who are going to be spewing this stuff. And it's a lot more transparent in crypto policy to kind of see where everyone's at, including the banks. But just be aware, this is kind of how the media cycle works, and it's going to get a lot more contentious pretty shortly.
Speaking of the banks, you mentioned earlier they're lobbying right now, trying to get senators on their side to not push through the Clarity Act. Their gripe has been the stablecoin yield situation. Even though there's been a compromise, they still sent out letters. They're still drumming up a whole bunch of noise. So what, in addition to lobbying some of these senators, what else could they do? Or is that their only avenue? And do you think they can still throw some punches to stop this bill?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the thing about DC is also, and this is a lot more than kind of the prior DC stuff and the lobbying side. You can always like obfuscate and hide behind either, conservative leaning groups or think tanks or, progressive groups, or even things not even entirely related to, your industry. We've seen, of all things, like a lot of housing groups came out against the crypto bill, months ago. And I'm sure the banks are probably involved in a lot of the sponsoring of those groups, or members probably of some of those groups. We saw a lot of labor unions get involved in coming out against it. I mean, the AFL and CIO came out against it. I mean, besides the Community Reinvestment Act, the banks and the AFL-CIO do not agree on anything. I think it also kind of shows that like this is definitely the incumbent class just trying to stall and delay. I mean, it's kind of obvious because they all just have the similar gripes, or they can't really have anything concrete in policy. They just say, "Oh, it enables Trump's crypto grift" or something to that effect. And the idea again is to scare away as many Democrats as possible. And say that you should not be doing this. So it's kind of unfortunate, but the other side is it's kind of obvious to see it. Now, again, you don't have to go necessarily through the banks or the bank CEO itself. They can go through other ways. But this is kind of what we see in the lobbying and the PR side is that the narratives do matter. They carry a lot of weight. And we're at the principal level now. So, there are some very, technical issues like DeFi, for example, that we've been focusing on. But, we're talking to the actual senators, the ones who don't really deal with these issues on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis. The only thing they've really dealt with crypto is the Genius Act. Those are the senators are targeting, the ones that just do not know about this, and then they're trying to sell it and sound bites. On the same time, so is crypto. We're trying to sell the positive sides here. So this is kind of how it looks like, both, again, publicly and privately.
Ron, speaking of the Genius Act, I hear when Jeremy Allaire from Circle goes on Fox Business recently and shoots down immediately this stablecoin yield issue simply because of the Genius Act and what's written in there that they cannot legally, be incentivized to make profit from these things. Why aren't more people hollering about this when he so easily just knocked that question down on mainstream media? Like, why aren't people getting behind that more and screaming that to these people who are making that an issue?
That's the best part about the Clarity Act and kind of seeing how it's evolved, because we were talking the House version of this months ago. I mean, almost a year ago. This was not an issue. Like, this has not come up. The Genius Act was also still working its way through the Senate. But then all of a sudden, when the Genius Act got passed and the Clarity Act got moved over to the Senate, all of a sudden there is this discovery of a loophole, and they kind of framed it as a loophole, and they're really pushing that the yield issue with third parties offering yield was existential. And again, they've been rebuffed both by the White House publicly, by studies. But the fact that we are still talking about this, the fact that they've been able to delay this bill so long, and the fact that we've been able to have this narrative built around a loophole when it actually is just them failing to lobby, or them failing to catch this, or them maybe just trying to protect their own, whatever the motivation, they've been strong enough to at least bend a narrative that's been really tough to go up against. But I think as time has gone on, we found out that they really didn't have a position, or the position was not a compromise. And when a compromise did come out, they're still against it. And that compromise was pretty much down the middle. So crypto was able to give a little bit, but the banks are not able to give a little bit on their side. So it's unfortunate. But for, at least from hearing from sources, there seems to be a fracturing among the banks as well. And that does track with, what we're seeing here in New York, where a lot more of the counterparties in New York for us are the banks and a lot of these institutional players. I think either the DC lobbyists are getting a different message, or maybe one or two banks are a little behind the curve than others, but time will tell. I think they're on the losing side, and that's been apparent through the markup recently.
Ron, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on. So is this really about stablecoin yield if there's a compromise, or is this about stalling the Clarity Act because we need to catch up we are left behind. Crypto native firms are getting OCC chartered license, all these things.
I mean, that seems to be the playbook in my opinion. But again, I'm sure they'll tell you something very different. But we're also seeing this playbook done, for decades past in DC. Try to use DC to stall your competition, to outlaw them, or to burn them in regulation so that they can't grow whatsoever. And when the time comes, you take over market share and move on forward. You can kind of argue we're seeing the same thing with SIFMA and Citadel arguing against tokenization. I'm sure we'll get into that later on, but the SEC maybe having guidance soon. We're seeing a lot of industries who are the incumbent largest players who've done really well in the traditional markets put a lot of pause here. And again, some of their arguments may carry some weight here, but some of them might also be built with a view that, hey, we're just not ready to take over the market share yet, or hey, there's too much competition on the future headlines here, so maybe we gotta slow this down a little bit. So it's a very classic DC tactic, but at the same time, it's a really transparent policy realm. So it's really, you can just go on Twitter, you can probably see who's saying what. You can go to the SEC comment letters and you can kind of say exactly what companies and what trade associations saying what. So you can make the decision for yourself, but I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. Are you following these, like circles, USYC, thoughts on these transformer money markets where you can basically optimize on all channels, switching between being a stable coin and then you're a money market fund and then you're a deposit? Is there anything, it seems to me that this is going to be the future, but is there anything in Clarity that would stall something like this from happening?
Not necessarily. I mean, I would look at the rulemaking for the Genius Act. That's still going through for quite some time. I think it's the deadlines are still coming up for the end of the year, and there's going to be more deadlines going on forward. The Clarity Act is going to be about 2 years of rulemaking afterwards. So, a lot of these more technicalities, especially with the rulemakings with the SEC, for example, that would be in the money market camp and probably in the OCC camp as well. That's where you're going to have a lot of these rulemakings getting into those nitty gritty areas. So a lot of these kind of more technical products and such, A, are enabled because we now have a little more regulatory clarity, but B, a lot of the ones that are undecided or unclear right now, I think you're going to see that ironed out in the rulemaking process, but it's going to be taking a little more time. So, but Circle's definitely taking advantage of the situation, and it seems to be, working with regulators on their products. So overall, they've been, at least in my opinion, doing pretty well. So we'll see kind of what happens post Clarity when it happens, or if it happens.
Ron, you mentioned earlier that the next steps for the Clarity, the Senate Agriculture Committee, they have to merge their version with the marked up version. But eventually, let's say this bill makes it out of the Senate, it does have to go to the House again to be voted before it goes to President Trump's desk. Do you anticipate any roadblocks in the House, a la Maxine Waters and other people?
Yeah, so actually probably be helpful to kind of break down what an ideal scenario is. So right now, I'd say if we do reach that goal, hey, we're able to find 60 votes before the July 4th, self-imposed deadline. The idea is that hopefully we can use those last 3 weeks or 2 weeks of July to get a vote scheduled for the whole Clarity Act itself on the Senate floor. And it usually takes a week. If not, it can maybe be a little more. So that's if we get to that point, because in August, all Congress goes back to the districts to campaign. So that's a very big deadline, but I will also say there's a lot of other bills out there that have the same kind of self-imposed deadline. So there is a very high chance we could slip into September, which is dangerous, but it's not the end of the world by any means. I think this is actually, again, would be a different conversation if we didn't have Democrats, but now we have Democrats. This is a very different conversation. So I'd say ideally we would pass it out before the end of July. Now, if there's a week buffer, it could go right back to the House, and potentially the House could vote out right then and there, a day or two afterwards, or 3 or so, and then go to the president's desk potentially in a week or two. Again, so the ideal scenario could be, best case, maybe at the end of July. I'm going to go with more mid to late September here. And then you have to remember October, they're also out campaigning. November is about 2-3 weeks. And then December is about 2-3 weeks as well. So, it's not a lot of time. And these bills do take a little bit to kind of move across the Senate, again, including a whole week. And so what, these opposition forces are trying to do right now is they're trying to stall or throw roadblocks as much as they can. And to your point, kind of other roadblocks we might see in the House, it's kind of playing out right now in the housing bill. So this is a very live fire issue. It's a central bank digital currency. It's the top issue right now. And surprisingly, it's in the housing conversation because it was in the Genius conversation. Then Trump had to bring Republicans in and say, hey, knock it out. We'll deal with it in the defense bill. It got stripped from the defense bill. It's now in the housing bill. And they might get stripped from the housing bill. So it could very much be well into the Clarity Act, and that could be a problem. So so I keep an eye on the CBDC issue with the housing bill going through this House right now. Other than that, we'll see potentially, there are concerns about the DeFi provisions and the DeFi developer protections. And we'll have to see what happens in the amendment process in the Senate. So I'd keep an eye on the amendments. These are going to be really important. The banks are going to try to get some amendments in. The casinos are going to try probably get some amendments in. The credit cards are going to get some amendments in. We'll see how that process works. But there's a situation where maybe they water down the DeFi developer protections, and we needed some folks in the House to step up and amend it to add those protections back in, and that could really delay the process here. So I would definitely keep an eye on the amendments, keep an eye on the House, and we'll see what happens. There are a lot of landmines here, but I'm still optimistic. I moved my prediction from 25% recently to about 45%. So a lot can go wrong, but the chessboard's looking pretty good.
Almost halfway there. We'll take
Almost.
it, 45%. On one of the pages in Clarity, I did see they definitely differentiate between DeFi and centralized entities. Can you expand on what would be the issue with the DeFi part?
Yeah, we're seeing the law enforcement community or lobby really kind of push for more purview into both front ends as well as DeFi transactions, and kind of creating either a honeypot or having some government surveillance, or even having sanction authority potentially. A whole slew of national security elements can kind of permeate into the DeFi ecosystem. And of course, we want to make sure that if you're a developer, the threat of law enforcement knocking at your door saying shut this down, you're going to jail, like Roman Storm and others, does not become the case. And so there's been a lot of good groups like DeFi Education Fund, BA, Coin Center have been really working hard to make sure those developer protections from the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act remain baked into the language. Now, of course, there was an amendment that was adopted in the Bank Committee, which did allow for law enforcement to pursue after developers if there is, intention to do something illicit here. And of course, the words do matter here, and I'm going to let the lawyers more talk about that in depth because it is important. But we did see, if you call it, candidly, it's a little bit of a watering down the DeFi developer protections. Not enough, it seems, to get a lot of the major crypto players up in arms at it. But there's definitely a lot of folks to keep an eye on it because, of course, the national security folks do always have a trumping argument in DC. National security is something that always tends to be the important thing of the day, and it's a scare tactic in a lot of cases. So, we're definitely keeping an eye on it. We're definitely making sure we have the allies in place. But I would definitely keep an eye on the DeFi section. But the good news, lastly, is that at least on the industry side, we are all very well aligned here. I would say, what's good for DeFi is good for centralized exchanges, which is good for market makers like us, which is good for VCs and all across the ecosystem. Because at least in DC, we're all friends as a crypto industry because we got enough forces against us, and we got to make sure we unite and watch out for everyone versus trying to watch out for one sector or one company.
Ron, a quick question about the Democrats. I'm curious about the dynamic there. You mentioned Senator Angela Alsobrooks. She was great getting the compromise done with Senator Tom Tillis. Who are the other Democrats that are supporting the Clarity Act? And where is Chuck Schumer? Because in the past, we've seen him use his influence to kind of rally other Democrats behind the Fit 21 bill and all these other things. Is he in support of this?
We haven't seen anything publicly from Chuck Schumer, but to your point, there's been a couple Politico and Punchbowl articles in the past, and also we've seen this in the Genius Act where he said privately, allegedly, hey, like, get on board with the crypto priorities, or hey, this is an important industry for us, or hey, like, these guys got a lot of money. I think it's been a variation of all three over the course of the past 2 years. But Chuck Schumer's a political operative. Now, mind you, he didn't support the Genius Act, if I recall correctly, but he's a power player. He's also kind of one of those folks who probably understands where the vote threshold very much is, and who can maybe save face or such. But that's how he operates. Now, back to the Democrats. We did see a couple amendments actually in the Bain Committee that did showcase that there is a break among the Democrats, and some of them didn't vote against the bill entirely, but they did vote for some amendments that were Republican. So take Mark Warner from Virginia. So I see definitely as a gettable target. We have Andy Kim from New Jersey. I'd say he also, I believe, voted for a couple. We have Raphael Warnock from Georgia. He's definitely gettable, voted for some of those amendments as well. Cortez Masto from Nevada. She's been another optimistic voice, you could say, but definitely more in the law enforcement camp. So I look at those three as like more immediate and have a track record here. But then you got to go back to the Ag Committee too. So you have Cory Booker from New Jersey. He's been one of the good guys on this issue. We got plenty of folks like Tina Smith as well, and Kristen Gillibrand. So I'd say the numbers are definitely there. Genius got 68 votes, and that was including 2 Republicans defecting. And so I think the realm is definitely there, and the political cover is there now too. So if you're a Democrat, This is actually a pretty good opportunity, especially given that Gallego and also Brooks really kind of went against the grain, went against their party, and stepped out in the line of fire. That's really rare. So, we really got to thank those two because that's not the political easy thing to do. They took the hard way to do things, but they understand this is the right thing to do because we need a regulatory bill here. And while they have caveats of saying the ethics issues, they took a chance here, and that's a lot to commend. That's really rare to see in politics these days.
I
Absolutely.
totally agree. I loved what Senator also Brooks said. And Tony and I talked about that last week, but how she mentioned her children and understanding that this is a part of their future, not so much playing into the politics part of this, but really seeing the future generational wealth to this. I hope she doesn't turn back on that because that was such a great statement.
No, it was. And, I guess that behind the scenes, a lot of people don't know potentially is that a lot of the staffers, they've either worked in the House before, and I've worked in them when I used to work in the House on crypto legislation, or they've been around it for, almost a decade at this point. So it's kind of cool knowing so that a lot of these staffers who I worked with on both sides of the aisle are a lot supporting these, Democrats and key Republicans at this space. So the folks backing the senators up right now are really experienced and know what they're talking about. We're not dealing with kind of a junior crew here or not knowing the technology. This is a really smart staff here. And actually, I had two of them on my panel at Consensus the other day. So it was kind of exciting to see kind of how, at least publicly, how the sausage is made in DC. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of experience here. And I think it's in a good spot. And again, on the Democrat side especially, there's a lot of good talent over there.
Ron, final item here before we let you go. What are you hearing about the Bitcoin reserve? Because Patrick Witt said there's an upcoming announcement, and there's also talks of Iran using Bitcoin in the Strait of Hormuz and much more. Are you hearing anything or anything that's not in the media yet?
It was. I was also a little shocked to hear Patrick Witt mention that at the Solana conference. He's been teasing that, ever since for a little bit here and there. I'm not entirely sure. Again, my mind naturally goes to the Iran situation, especially with the recent news today. So we'll see on that front. I don't know what else it would be necessarily on the top of my head. But unfortunately, I've not heard of anything directly. I know there's a lot more of the Bitcoin lobby folks are involved in that, but overall, it seems positive because we kind of thought this issue was kind of done, check the box, but it doesn't seem so. So we'll see.
Hopefully, it's a way for them to buy Bitcoin. That would be pretty amazing.
We'll see. I doubt it'll be taxpayer dollars in election year, especially given the ethics being front and center right now. But hey, we are looking at potentially a bull run coming up soon, so it could be a good investment.
And thank you so much for joining us. We will certainly be following Clarity and all the updates. We remain optimistic, but it's nice to hear that the crypto natives are remaining unified despite all the political theater. So thank you so much.
Hey, this might be the first time crypto's unified. So let's keep that. Let's keep politics out of this. And thanks again, guys. Really appreciate it.